I want you to imagine giving 10 years of your life to something, not 10 years of showing up. 10 years of building. From nothing. With your hands and your time and the kind of decisions that keep you awake at 3 in the morning because if you get them wrong, real people lose their jobs. Now imagine watching your father hand all of it to your brother at a dinner table. In public. With champagne, and then imagine your father looking at you across the table and saying, with a smile on his face, that you were just the engine. That your brother would be the driver. That was the moment I understood something I had refused to see for a decade, and everything that happened after that, the walkouts, the headlines, the phone calls, my father crying at a restaurant table in front of strangers, all of it started right there. Let me take you back to the beginning. I was 19 years old when I walked into my father's company for the first time as an employee. Not as the boss's son getting a cushy desk job. I started in the warehouse. Inventory. Loading. Shift coverage when someone called in sick. My father believed you had to understand a business from the ground up, and on that point at least, he was absolutely right. What he did not tell me was what I was walking into. The company was in serious trouble. Not dramatically, not visibly, but the kind of quiet trouble that only someone inside the numbers can see. Aging systems. A client base that had not grown in 3 years. Operational costs creeping upward while margins shrank. 2 of our oldest suppliers had started giving us worse terms because they sensed weakness. My father knew. He just did not know what to do about it. So I started doing things about it. Nobody asked me to. I just could not watch something my father had spent his life building dissolve slowly because nobody was paying close enough attention. So I paid attention. I rebuilt the inventory system from scratch. I renegotiated 3 supplier contracts personally, flew to 2 of those meetings on my own money because my father thought they were not worth his time. I identified a logistics bottleneck that had been costing us money for years that nobody had ever bothered to trace. Within 3 years the company had stabilized, within 5 it was growing faster than it had in a decade, within 10, it had tripled revenue, doubled its client base, and was being mentioned in regional business publications as one of the area's standout success stories. Every article about the company featured a photo of my father. I was in the background of those photos every single time. I told myself it did not matter. I told myself I was not doing it for the recognition. I told myself that what I was building was real regardless of whose name was attached to it. I told myself a lot of things over 10 years. Meanwhile, my brother Ethan was living a completely different life, university first, a good one, studying economics, which he genuinely enjoyed. Then an MBA program abroad at a school with a name that made my father go quiet with pride every time he said it. Ethan was sharp, likable, good in a room. He visited the company during holidays and gave opinions in meetings that everyone nodded along with. He was introduced to clients as the future of the business. I was introduced as his other son. I noticed. Of course I noticed. But I kept building. Because the work was real, and the work was mine, and I genuinely believed, that in the end, results would speak louder than anything else. I was wrong about that. My father called a family dinner on a Thursday evening, not at home. At a restaurant, a good one, the kind with white tablecloths and a wine list. He had invited extended family. 3 aunts and 2 uncles. His 2 oldest business partners. My mother sat at the far end of the table with an expression I could not quite read and would spend years trying to decode. I thought it was an anniversary. Maybe a milestone birthday I had miscounted. It was neither. My father stood up about halfway through dinner and tapped his glass. The table went quiet. He straightened his jacket, cleared his throat, and began a speech. It was a good speech. Long, emotional, the kind of thing he had clearly rehearsed. He talked about what he had built from nothing. About what it meant to him. About legacy, he used that word 4 times, I counted. About the kind of leader his company needed to carry it forward into the next chapter. He looked at Ethan. He announced his succession. He produced a symbolic envelope, the formal documentation of the inheritance and transfer of ownership, and slid it across the table to my brother in front of everyone. The table applauded. My uncles whistled. Someone poured more champagne, and then my father turned to me. He was still smiling. I want you to understand that. He was genuinely smiling, like what he was about to say was a compliment, like he had thought carefully about these words and was proud of them. You are the engine of this company. But every engine needs a driver. And Ethan is going to be that driver. More applause. I smiled. I raised my glass with everyone else. I said congratulations to my brother, who looked at me with an expression that lived somewhere between triumph and guilt. I excused myself to use the bathroom. I stood at the sink. I ran cold water over my wrists. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time, then I dried my hands, straightened my collar, and went back to the table. I finished my dinner. I stayed until the end. I shook my father's hand when I left and told him it was a wonderful evening. I sat in my car in the restaurant parking lot for an hour and 20 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the dashboard the entire time. Then I drove home. 3 days after the dinner, my mother came to my apartment alone. She had never done that before. She always called ahead, always came with my father, always operated within the structure of our family like a diplomat navigating a country she had not chosen to live in. She sat at my kitchen table. I made coffee. We sat across from each other in silence for a moment, then she told me something she had been carrying for 2 years. My father knew. He had always known. He was not confused about who was running the company. He had commissioned 2 separate internal financial reviews without telling either of us, specifically to trace the contribution of each son to the company's growth. He had highlighted reports. He had made notes. He understood, with complete clarity, that the trajectory of that business was my work, and then he chose Ethan anyway. My mother wrapped both hands around her coffee cup and told me the reason my father gave her, the one time she challenged him on it directly. He said he needed the company to be taken seriously by the outside world. He said Ethan had the credentials, the degree, the image of what a CEO should look like. He said you were too valuable where you were to be wasted in a boardroom. She paused. Then she said the part that was harder. He also said he was afraid that if he gave it to you, you would not need him anymore. The room was very quiet. My mother put her cup down. Her eyes were wet. She said, I told him he was making a terrible mistake. He told me I did not understand business. I should have pushed harder. I should have been louder. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I sat across from her and I did not say anything for a long time, because I was trying to figure out which part hurt more, the fact that my father had done it, or the fact that he had known exactly what he was doing when he did. I made a decision the morning after my mother left my apartment. I was going to stay for 8 months. And I was going to be the most professional, most cooperative, most helpful version of myself that anyone in that company had ever seen, not because I had forgiven anyone. Not because I had changed my mind about leaving, because I was going to spend those 8 months doing something very specific. I documented everything, every client relationship, the history, the contact names, the personal details that kept those accounts loyal. Every operational system I had built, the logic behind it, the dependencies, what would break first without proper maintenance. Every supplier agreement, the terms I had negotiated, the relationships underneath the contracts that made those terms possible. On paper, this was the handover documentation. The most thorough handover documentation in the history of the company. In reality, it was a paper trail. Proof, in writing, with my name on every page, of exactly what I had built and how. I also deepened every client relationship I had personally. Not for the company. For myself. I met people for coffee. I remembered their children's names. I became, over those 8 months, not just the person who managed their account, but the person they trusted. Marcus watched all of this and said nothing. He understood completely. In my final week, Ethan called me into his office. He sat behind the desk that used to be my father's and looked at me with the particular expression of a man who senses something is wrong but cannot name it. He asked me if I thought he was ready. I looked at him for a long moment. I think you are about to find out, I said. And I smiled, and I meant every single word. I handed my resignation to my father on a Tuesday morning. 1 page. Clean. Professional. No bitterness on paper. He read it slowly. Then he looked up. I always knew you would do this eventually. You never had the vision for what this company could become. You only knew how to maintain things, not to grow them. I let that sentence finish, then I stood up. I shook his hand. And I walked out of his office for the last time. What happened next, I did not plan. I want to be clear about that. Marcus resigned the same afternoon, the head of client relations resigned the next morning. 3 members of the operations team, people I had personally hired and trained, resigned by the end of the week. 2 more the week after. 7 key people in 11 days. Ethan called me, furious, at 9 p.m. on a Friday night. He said I had orchestrated a walkout. That I had poisoned the company on my way out. I told him, calmly, that people make their own choices. That nobody left because of me. They left because of what they saw. Ask yourself, I said, what did they see? I hung up. Then I switched my phone off and slept better than I had in months. I was not watching what happened to the company after I left. I was busy, but the industry is not large, and word travels, and eventually the word traveling became impossible to miss. Ethan's first major strategic move was a bold regional expansion. 3 new markets simultaneously. Aggressive hiring. High-profile announcements. The kind of move that gets you featured in business publications as a visionary right up until the cash flow cannot support it. The operations infrastructure he had restructured, dismantling the systems I spent years building in favor of leaner, more modern frameworks that looked better on paper, began showing cracks within 6 months. Bottlenecks. Delays. Missed delivery windows that started small and compounded, then the clients started leaving, not all of them, but the ones that mattered, the 2 flagship accounts, companies I had personally brought in, relationships I had spent years cultivating, clients who had renewed their contracts every year not because of price but because of trust, submitted formal termination notices within the same week. Their letters cited, in corporate language, a loss of confidence in the stability of the leadership team. Those 2 accounts alone represented 34% of the company's annual revenue, and then a journalist called. I do not know who tipped her off. I suspect it was someone inside the company, someone watching the ship list and deciding they did not want to go down with it. She was thorough. She spoke to former employees, to industry contacts, to clients who were willing to talk on background. The headline ran on a Tuesday morning: Family Empire in Freefall, sources point to leadership overhaul gone wrong. The article did not name me. It did not need to. Every person in the industry who read it understood exactly what it was describing. My phone did not stop for 3 days. Messages from contacts, from former colleagues, from clients, from people I had not spoken to in years. None of them said what they meant directly. They did not have to. A follow-up piece ran 2 weeks later. Someone had leaked internal emails. The staff walkouts were described in detail. A former senior employee went on record anonymously saying that the company had lost in 11 days the institutional knowledge it had taken a decade to build. My father read both articles. I know because my mother called me after the second one and said simply, he has not left the house in 4 days. He called me 11 times over 4 days. I let everyone go to voicemail. On the 12th call, on a Thursday afternoon, I picked up. His voice sounded like someone else's. Quieter than I had ever heard it. The authority that had always lived in it, that particular confidence of a man who had never seriously doubted himself, was completely gone. He asked if we could meet. Just the 2 of us. Dinner. I said yes. I arrived at the restaurant first. He came in 7 minutes later and I almost did not recognize him. Not because he looked different physically, but because the way he carried himself was different. He walked like a man who had set something very heavy down and was not sure his legs still worked properly without the weight. He sat down. He did not look at the menu. He reached into his jacket and slid a folder across the table to me. I opened it. Inside were printouts. Financial reports, quarter by quarter, going back 12 years. He had gone through every single one and highlighted sections in yellow marker. Every highlighted section was a client win, a cost reduction, a strategic decision, a turning point in the company's growth, and next to every highlighted section, in his own handwriting, in blue ink, was one word, you. He had gone back through everything. 12 years of company history. And traced every significant moment of growth to its source. He had done it himself. With a highlighter and a pen. At his kitchen table, alone, at whatever hour of the night it takes for a proud man to finally stop arguing with the truth. I looked at the folder. Then I looked at him, and my father, this stubborn, proud, self-made man who had built something from nothing and had never once in my entire lifetime admitted he was wrong about anything significant, put his face in his hands, and broke down completely. Not quietly. Not with the composed grief of someone who has rehearsed this moment. He cried the way someone cries when they have been carrying something for so long that when it finally comes out, they cannot control it. His shoulders shook. The couple at the next table looked over. He did not stop. He did not even try to stop. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red and his hands were unsteady on the table. He said, I told myself I was building a legacy. What I was actually doing was protecting my ego. I wanted a CEO who looked like what I thought a CEO should look like. Someone with the right degree, the right credentials, the right image. I convinced myself that was vision. It was vanity. He stopped. He pressed his hands flat on the table. You were everything this company was. Every number that meant anything, every client that stayed, every year we grew instead of contracted, that was you. And I stood at that dinner table and I told you that you were just the engine. In front of your family. In front of everyone. His voice broke on the last sentence. I have been sick about it every single day since you walked out that door. I am sorry. I am deeply, deeply sorry. The restaurant hummed around us. Someone laughed at a table across the room. A waiter moved past with a tray. I sat with his apology for a long time before I said anything, because I wanted to answer him honestly, not from the part of me that was still raw, and not from the part of me that wanted to make him feel better than he deserved to. I told him the apology was real. That it mattered. That some of what was broken between us could be repaired, slowly, imperfectly, over time, and then I told him the other thing. The thing I needed him to hear. I am not coming back. Not because of anger. Because that chapter is finished. What I am building now is mine, completely mine, and I am not walking away from that for any reason. Not even for you. He nodded. He did not argue. It was the first time in my life I had ever seen my father accept something he did not want to accept without fighting it. That, more than anything else, told me how much had changed. My company turned 2 years old last spring. We have signed 14 clients in that time. 12 of them came from my father's company, including both flagship accounts whose departure triggered the collapse. They did not come to me because I asked them to. They came because they knew who they were actually working with when things were good. Marcus is my chief operating officer. He has never once suggested we slow down. The team is 17 people, every one of them handpicked, every one of them someone I had worked with before or specifically sought out. People who left stable positions to come and build something real with me. A regional business publication ran a profile on the company 8 months ago. They called me, in print, the quiet architect behind one of the most remarkable business growth stories in the region. I framed it. It hangs in my office directly behind my desk, not out of vanity. As a reminder. For the days when things are hard and the early mornings feel long. A reminder of what 10 years of invisible work eventually becomes when you stop letting other people decide its value. My father's company is still operating. Scaled back significantly, restructured, run now by an outside management team. Ethan stepped away from the CEO role 18 months ago. I hear he is doing consulting work. I do not hold it against him. He was handed something nobody had prepared him for by a father who needed to believe in him more than he needed to be honest. I understand that now in a way I could not when I was in the middle of it. My father and I have dinner every few weeks. The relationship is different, more honest, more equal, built on something sturdier than the version that existed before all of this burned away. It is not perfect. Some things that break leave marks even when they mend. My mother calls every Sunday without fail. She never misses. People ask me sometimes what I would have done differently. If I could go back, and the honest answer is, I do not think I would change the part where I gave everything I had. Because that part was real. That work was real. The company that grew from it was real, and the people whose livelihoods depended on it were real, and I would do that again. What I would change is the 10 years I spent believing that results would speak for themselves in an environment where the person listening had already decided what they wanted to hear. If you are somewhere right now, giving everything you have to something that will never have your name on it, I am not telling you to stop working hard. I am telling you to work hard on the right thing. The work does not lie. The numbers do not lie. And if the people around you refuse to read them honestly, eventually the market will read them for you. Loudly. In the press. At a restaurant table with a highlighter and a blue pen. My father gave the company to the son with a degree. He thought a diploma was the same as a decade of work. It is not. You cannot inherit what someone else bled for. You cannot put a title on top of nothing and call it leadership. He built a company, I built an empire. The difference is mine has my name on the door.